Hello and thank you for joining me. I have something special to share with you, a story that you may have heard before, but with a unique twist. So sit back and enjoy. The story of Cinderella. Long ago, in a beautiful kingdom, there lived a young girl named Cinderella. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant and his wife, who loved her dearly. Cinderella was a happy and carefree child playing in the gardens of their grand estate. But she loved nothing more than sitting with her mother, who would read her stories and fairy tales. As she listened, she would snuggle up to her mother and gaze at the peculiar pendant that her mother always wore on her neck. It was a family heirloom that had been passed down from generation to generation, and Cinderella loved to hear the stories of its magical powers. Sadly, when Cinderella was just a young girl, her mother fell ill and passed away. Before she died, her mother gave Cinderella a family heirloom pendant, telling her that it would help her in times of need. Cinderella was heartbroken, and her father was overcome with grief. He tried his best to raise his daughter alone, but he was often away on business trips, leaving Cinderella alone with her thoughts and memories. As time passed, Cinderella's father became lonely and decided to marry again. He chose a beautiful but cruel woman to be his new wife, who had 2 daughters of her own. Cinderella was overjoyed at the thought of having a stepmother and sisters to play with, but her happiness was short-lived. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were jealous of her beauty and kindness, and they made her life miserable. They forced her to do all the housework, and treated her like a servant. Cinderella was left with nothing but her dreams and her kind heart. Days, weeks, months and years went one after another. But then, one day, the king of the land decided to hold a grand ball at his palace. All the eligible maidens in the kingdom were invited, and the prince would choose his bride from among them. Cinderella longed to attend the ball, but her stepmother and stepsisters forbade her from going. They mocked her and told her she was too dirty and common to attend such a grand event. Heartbroken, Cinderella retreated to her room and wept. Suddenly she felt warmth on her neck, as her mother's pendant began to glow. And just then, came a chill in the air, and a ghostly figure appeared before her. It was her mother, looking as beautiful as Cinderella remembered.
"Cinderella, my dear daughter,"
her mother said, smiling warmly.
"your desperation and determination have awakened the power of the pendant. This power can only be activated once every decade, and its effect will only last until midnight. But I feel your grief, and I believe you will use this power for good."
The pendant seemed to come alive in her hands, its power surging through her like a paintbrush in the hands of an artist. And so she quickly went to work, creating a beautiful gown out of an old dress and some scraps of fabric she had saved. She transformed her rags into a magnificent ball gown that shimmered and sparkled in the moonlight. As she made her way to the ball, Cinderella remembered the warning of the pendant's magic. Everything would vanish at the stroke of midnight. She knew she only had a few hours to enjoy the ball. As Cinderella stepped into the ballroom, she was struck by great splendor. But in time she also started to notice the artificiality of it all. Everyone seemed to be putting on a show, their movements rehearsed and their words scripted. Despite the respect she received for her stunning appearance, she couldn't help but feel out of place. She was still trying to have fun, That was her magical night after all. And while walking around the ballroom, she indeed caught the eye of the prince. He approached her with courteous words and they began to dance. To Cinderella's surprise, there were sparks of mutual interest between them, and for a moment, she forgot all about the stiffness of the ball. But as their dance was dragging on, with both of them wanting the moment to last, she noticed that the prince too was growing tired of the ball formalities. So, she took a chance and whispered to him,
"Let's sneak out and enjoy the fresh air on the balcony."
The prince's eyes lit up. They slipped away from the ballroom one by one and rendezvoused at the balcony, where they talked and laughed for hours on end, lost in each other's company. But as the clock struck midnight, Cinderella realized the time. She took a deep breath, knowing that she had to leave. And with a shy smile, Cinderella whispered,
"Thank you for this moment. It was like a dream. Maybe one day we'll meet again, but until then, I'll keep this memory close to my heart."
The prince's heart sank at the thought of her leaving, but he somehow knew that he couldn't stop her. He watched as she disappeared into the night. In her haste, she climbed down the vine and rushed out of the castle gates. Prince was left confused, with only a peculiar pendant, tangled in the vines below the balcony. Breathless and exhilarated, Cinderella made her way home, reliving every moment of the night in her mind. The night was surreal and magical, but she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever meet Prince again. After the ball, the prince was determined to find the mysterious lady he had shared a dance with. He searched high and low, but none of the ladies he met seemed to fit Che's description. And the pendant he held was his only clue. Meanwhile, Cinderella's life was again miserable. And she couldn't stop thinking of both the prince and the heirloom pendant she lost, the most precious memory of her mother. Days and weeks went by, and both were suffering on their own, longing for the magical meeting they had. Then one day, while doing her chores, Cinderella overheard castle servants in the marketplace talking about the prince's search for the lady from the ball. Her heart skipped a bit, as she realized he is still looking for her. She joined the conversation with castle ladies to learn of the hidden entrance to the castle. Even with the hints from the servants, it wasn't easy to find an entrance, but she was persistent and finally found a way to slip behind the castle walls. She knew the layout of the castle from the ball, so she was navigating her way to the prince's chambers when she got found by the guards.
"Hey girl! What are you doing out here?"
Guards immediately wanted to detain the rag-clothed Cinderella. Her heart raced with fear as she dodged their grasping hands and darted through the castle halls. She felt like a mouse scurrying through a maze, unsure of where she was going but desperate to escape. Room by room, she finally made it to Prince's chambers. There at the table stood the pendant. She raced towards it, with guards rushing behind. And then entered the prince from the other side of the room, determined to protect his memento from a daring thief. Then as the prince stood before her, Cinderella's heart raced with fear and anticipation. With trembling lips, she repeated the words she had said to him on that magical night time ago.
"Thank you for this moment. It was like a dream. Perhaps fate has brought us together once again. I'll keep this memory and this pendant close to my heart."
The prince's eyes widened as he finally realized who she was, and a sudden smile spread across his face. Overcome with joy and relief, the prince took Cinderella's hand and led her outside to the castle gardens, where he presented her with a bouquet of roses. They walked and talked for hours, reminiscing about the story that brought them together and discovering new things about each other. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Soon after, the prince proposed to Cinderella, and she accepted without hesitation. The wedding was a magnificent affair, with decorations of gold and silver adorning the grand ballroom. Cinderella's stepmother, stepsisters, and her father were among the guests, all dressed in their finest attire. Cinderella's stepsisters looked on with envy as she walked down the aisle, radiating beauty and grace in her white gown. During the reception, Cinderella's father gave a heartwarming speech about how proud he was of his daughter and how happy he was to see her find love and happiness. The prince's mother, too, welcomed Cinderella into the family with open arms, and the two women became fast friends. As the night drew to a close, Cinderella and the prince shared their first dance as a married couple, surrounded by their loved ones. They gazed into each other's eyes, lost in the moment, as if time stood still. And in that moment, they knew that they would love and cherish each other for all eternity. And what happened next, you might ask? Do they lived happily ever after? Sure do, but that's actually a long story on its own. Something for another time.